Hello and welcome. The fourth industrial revolution is upon us and underway. How is it affecting businesses, industrial automation, industrial enterprises, particularly the older generation manufacturing enterprises? And how are they coping, and what really lies ahead at the end of the road, or at the pot of gold, so to speak? Well, who better to put that question to than Jeff Immelt, the former CEO of GE and also currently chairman of Athenahealth. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Right. So, from your vantage point, having been in an industrial to digital conglomerate for many, many years, and looking at that whole world back and looking at the opportunities ahead, how does it look?
Look, I think there's a wave of technology that's coming through that's going to impact every business, from automation to artificial intelligence, and there's a wave of technology unlike any I've ever seen. The challenge for industrial companies is always productivity. The productivity of industrial companies has really flatlined over the last 5 or 10 years. So, at the end of the day, we use fancy words like fourth industrial revolution, things like that. But what it really is using technology to really advance productivity, customer service. Those things are important inside a company. And, in order to do that, it's both a combination of talent and business model and technology, and that's where some of the changes have to take place.
Right. So I remember interviewing the Chief Digital Officer of General Electric 2 years ago, and he was telling me the big challenges as well as the landscape and the opportunities. So if you were to look at how digital GE went, for instance, in its whether it's in turbine business or the, let's say, the locomotive engine business. So how do you look at that effort, and was it? Was there a lag? Were you fast enough?
Yeah. So I would say the benefits were really always about the installed base. How would we protect? How would we make the installed base more productive for our customers and things like that? I think in that context, digital investment really pays off. Has paid off for our customers and paid off for the company. I think the challenges are really more of how fast can you move the legacy company? How much do you need to invest in new talent? And there I think we struggled. We never got it quite right of what was the right balance of old and new. And I think that's where a lot of legacy companies kind of have a challenge, which is how fast do you take your old installed base, how fast do you take your old culture, and how quickly can you bring in people that can add to both technical context and also business model change.
And the way you say it, it seems to boil down to people completely.
Look, I think people always make a huge difference. The fact is that there are people that are talented in the digital world, digital natives, and they want to hang out with other people that are talented in the digital world. So in order to attract those people, you need to have enough scale that gives, or enough interesting work that makes it worth their while. And so I would say in some ways we were able to create that in GE, given the size and breadth and things like that. But it's equally challenging to decide, should it be a profit center, should it be a cost center? Should they only deal with internal clients or external clients? And those are the kinds of decisions that legacy companies have to make, that startups, it's much easier, if you will, for a startup to make those decisions.
Right. So let me ask the question from the other side. So consumers are still buying big engines, whether it's for aircraft or ships or locomotives, apart from the many other things that GE makes. So what's then going wrong? What's the missing piece of the puzzle?
Oh, look, I think it's the desire to do more for your customers, right? In other words, people may buy an engine, but what they really want is time on wing. They want velocity of the locomotive. They want a better scan mix for their MR scanner. So people want outcomes, not products today. And whoever delivers that is ultimately going to be successful. And I think that in the end is the opportunity that exists, that GE is realizing and other people are going to realize. And if they don't do it, other people are going to stand in the way and make it happen. So I think it's just like consumers have new opportunities to buy things or to buy things directly and not go to a store. And if you think about all the models of direct to consumer today that didn't exist before, industrial people don't really buy locomotives anymore. They buy velocity. They don't buy jet engines anymore. They buy time on wing. And that's where you have to become better to stay ahead of your customers. We're also going to get it from somebody else.
Right. So I'm going to come to the technology and health in a moment, but tell us about, about GE again. I mean, what's your sense today when you look back on the conglomerate structure, given the rise and evolution of so many different types of companies, particularly those who are, let's say, artificial intelligence natives and so on?
Well, look, I mean, I think they're kind of unrelated points. In other words, I think to a certain extent, having a multi-business structure allows you to take technology horizontally through the company in ways that single purpose companies can't. And that remains, I think, the opportunity for companies as they look forward in the future in terms of where these technologies go. So I think it can happen in a single purpose company, it can happen in a conglomerate, but what's really important is that it happens, right? And I always viewed one of the advantages we had was scale, so that you could take AI technology from the healthcare business to the aviation business to the power business, and you didn't have to reinvent everything as you were doing it, and you could match domain with technology. I viewed that as an advantage, not a disadvantage.
Right. So let's talk about technology in healthcare, your current portfolio. So where do you see the new horizons there? What are you thinking about or focusing on?
Look, there's always a multitude of technology going on in healthcare. So machine learning, big data, it can be very helpful in drug discovery. It can be very helpful to kind of stratify patients in terms of which will perform and which way to what kind of drug. That's on one side. I think more importantly is on the healthcare delivery, the healthcare services side, where you have the opportunity to match kind of artificial intelligence or analytical tools with how a primary physician works, or a radiologist works, or a cardiologist works. And I think we're in early days of that. And again, I don't see the technology being sold a la carte in that fashion. I think the AI has to be embedded in a radiology scan or a heart examination. And that, I think, is where some of the most exciting new business models are forming.
Right. So let me ask you a slightly broader question. So as you look ahead, there are trade winds. There was a lot of concern about which way businesses would have to invest or reinvest in the post-Trump world. How are you seeing and projecting ahead in the next year or two, particularly when it comes to how businesses
Look,
should
I think globalization is going to be much more about localization than ever before. I would say, while President Trump has put a finer point on it in the U.S., protectionism existed long before him in China, Europe, India, other places. So we just are going to live in a more protectionistic world. And I think, but it doesn't mean that global markets aren't important. Global markets are vastly important. I think businesses just have to be more flexible. They have to be more adaptable. They have to be more local than they were before. We have to know that people are counting jobs, whether you're in India or the US or China or Europe. People care about where work gets done. And we need to be facile around that. We need to understand it. So we went from an era where business people didn't have to worry about where work got done to an era where business people have to care about where work gets done. It's not a bad thing or a good thing, it just is what it is. And so I think business people spend too much time worrying about government, cajoling government, and our job is to be the reactor to whatever is happening and be good at that. And that's what we have to do.
And GE was one of the first to set up a business process outsourcing operation, perhaps the second in India, but at scale definitely the first. Now that reflected a certain thinking and philosophy from a different era, of course. When you look back at that thinking and philosophy and try and apply it today, do you think that things are going to fundamentally change, or is it cyclical?
I do. Again, what we invested into 20 years ago, 25 years ago, was kind of a wage arbitrage process where India had this vast array of highly educated people that didn't cost as much as they cost elsewhere in the world. It was a great strategy. It worked extremely well. Great companies were formed in India around that. But kind of those days are over now, and the task for the companies today are either to become more technically astute, invest in new skills, become more partnering with their clients, things like that. But the old kind of way is kind of done. But that's not a bad thing. That's the way the world works. Is ideas get old, and this idea got old. And it wasn't so much just politics, but it's just it's time for the next act. 20 years is a pretty good run for one idea. Now it's time for the second idea.
Right. And so what are the kind of ideas that are on your mind today?
Oh, look, it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of TCS or Wipro, people like that. But I think they have to take these new tools, robotics, AI, things like that. They have to embed those technologies in their services. They have to be even more research and development for the clients that they work with. And they have to really deliver outcomes. They it can't just be, a seat of IT is $100,000 here in the US and it's $50,000 in India. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be different than that. And that's what I think the leaders have to work on.
And what about the industrial world?
Oh gosh, I think the industrial world has to grab the next wave of tools and make them indigenous to the way they work. In other words, one of the things that I've fought with even myself is I didn't know what was possible. If you're a manufacturing leader today and let's say you're in your 40s and you're excellent at what you do, you don't know where automation can really go. You don't know where analytics can really go. And it's bridging this gap between what do I do in my job today and what's really the art of the possible. How do you bridge that gap like that? That is the challenge.
That's a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Mr. Jay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.